Start today with the presentation of Unifor. Please introduce yourself and your colleague, and you may begin.
Thank you. Appreciate you hearing us today. My name is Randy Kitt, and I'm the Director of Unifor at Media, and beside me is my colleague Mark Holland, our Media Sector Researcher. Unifor is Canada's largest private sector union with more than 315,000 members and over 10,000 members in the media sector, including 4,500 members in broadcasting. What do Netflix, Apple, Amazon have to do with news? This is the question that we need to answer here today. In 1999 and 2009, when the CRTC decided to exempt foreign digital streamers from Canada's tightly regulated broadcasting system, they effectively upended a decade-old business model for Canadian broadcasters. The effect of those decisions have caused severe harm to the production of Canadian news and especially local news. But we can't go back to 2009. But we can ensure that we address the shortfalls that the Broadcasting Act was supposed to protect. In effect, Netflix, Amazon, and the other foreign streamers have been getting a free pass in Canada, allowed to broadcast in this country without contributing to the system, as Canadian broadcasters have had to. And that must end now. Local news holds power to account, strengthens democracy, and builds community. And these roles have never been more important. Since 2012, private conventional TV has been a big money loser for both independent and big media companies. From 2019 to 22, the rate of profit for conventional TV was -7, -18.6, -12.4, and -17.7% respectively. These losses are real to our members. Between 2017 and 22, employment in the broadcasting industry decreased by almost 15%. This year alone, Unifor has lost over 100 good-paying television full-time jobs, and for every union job, many more non-union jobs were also lost. And yesterday's announcement that the CBC will axe 600 jobs keeps adding to the pile of lost, locally relevant programming for Canadians. Week in, week out, we brace ourselves for more job loss and programming cuts from Canadian broadcasters. The issue with Chorus and Global News is also top of mind, and I believe it is generally agreed that the Independent Local News Fund, the ILNF, is not sufficient to accommodate Global TV and needs immediate attention. The Rogers-Shaw merger decision promised to address this issue. The policy directive for this initiative also stresses the importance of local news, asking the Commission to consider the importance of sustainable support by the entire Canadian broadcast system for news and current events programming. Therefore, Unifor recommends that the Commission establish a local news media fund attached to the Online Streaming Act, similar to the former Local Programming Improvement Fund, the LPIF. Like BDUs, qualifying foreign streaming companies would be required to contribute a portion of their revenue generated in Canada to a fund that would in turn be distributed to qualifying news organizations in Canada. Under the current system, domestic legacy TV distributors must contribute at least 5% of their broadcast revenues to Canadian content creation and production. Other interveners here would have you reduce these amounts for all and ask less of the foreign streamers to maintain the current level of funding or even lessen funding levels, which in our view is not the way to level the playing field. Unifor, on the other hand, thinks the Commission should make the whole pie bigger. Therefore, we recommend that the Commission should increase contribution levels from 5 to 7%. The additional 2% should go directly to the proposed Local News Media Fund. Under this proposal, the ILNF could then be carefully merged with this new proposed news fund. In addition, Unifor recommends that the Commission should maintain the current Canadian Programming Expenditure, CPE, requirements and extend this obligation to online undertakings. Further, the Commission should consider requiring that a portion of the CPE money be earmarked for the production of local news and programming, or the equivalent amount should be directed toward the Local News Media Fund if the online undertaking doesn't produce any news programming. We've been talking all along about leveling the playing field, but that should mean added funds and obligations to better support the Canadian broadcasting system, not less for everyone to maintain a level of funding that we already know is not enough. Everyone knows that local broadcasters producing local news are in crisis, and only when we increase the pie can we start to repair the damage that has been created over the last 15 years. We are behind and we need to catch up. Foreign streamers' entry into the Canadian broadcasting system has created a crisis in local programming and local news, and it's time for them to pay their fair share, and it should be the cost of doing business in Canada. So what do Netflix, Apple, and Amazon have to do with the news? The answer is everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The existing ILNF? Well, I believe the ILNF is about $20 million. It's just not sufficient. If Global were to be folded into that fund, I think you'll hear from the independent stations that that they will not be able to maintain the level of funding for those stations. Global is just too big. The fund we're proposing would be similar to the LPIF, which a portion of that 5%, the current 5%, was folded into that. I believe in around the time 2014 that fund was worth about $100 million. So we see that $20 million in today's dollars just isn't sufficient. We've all seen the cost of everything just rise dramatically. I can't even begin to walk you through, the last week away here in Ottawa, and you're like, oh my goodness. And you see that our Canadian broadcasters are doing the exact same thing. And yesterday, CBC just cut 600 jobs because the cost of everything is just skyrocketed, and the cost of television production has also skyrocketed. So I'd imagine that $100 million in 2014 would have to be north of double that.
So is there a way that the ILNF could be amended to meet your objectives? Because you're talking about taking the ILNF, ensuring that those people who are recipients, so those who receive support, are kept whole under this new model.
Correct.
And we would merge it with the new fund. Is there any way that the ILNF could be amended and still meet the needs that you're talking about?
Oh, well, I think so. I mean, however you decide to slice the pie, as long as the money is the money. We made that proposal. I don't think that, whether you were to fold the ILNF into a news fund, or whether you were to keep the ILNF separate and expand it to accommodate the needs, our goal is to ensure that there's robust Canadian news in this country, and that the funding is sufficient.
Okay, thank you for that. And if I could just ask a point of clarification, your submissions seem to be more focused on audio visual, and I'm just wondering what you think the needs are in terms of audio and audio visual separately.
Right. I mean, if you look at our C18 proposals, for instance, you'll see that generally we believe that the funding should be platform agnostic. And that's been our general principle. In those proposals, we talk about inclusivity, we talk about accountability, and transparency. And I think the same would go for here. And inclusivity is that if you're an eligible broadcaster, you should be included in these funds.
Thank you for that. So we've heard from interveners over the past couple of weeks say that it's not fair that they would be asked to contribute to a fund, a news fund, when they don't produce news and local content. And I'm just wondering if you could respond to that.
Well, of course. I think that's our whole thesis here, is that the Canadian broadcasting system used to be a closed system that only Canadian broadcasters could be a part of, and those big American companies would have to license their programming to Canadian companies, and that's how those Canadian companies funded local news. In 2009, when the CRTC made the decision to exempt those foreign streamers, that was the beginning of the end for broadcast television in Canada and local news in Canada, and the funding model disappeared. And just like in my statement, we say that we can't close the barn doors. We can't just say Netflix can't broadcast in Canada anymore, but they can help pay towards the Canadian system, and that includes local news, and it is the cost of business to be here in Canada.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. I'm just going to look over at my colleagues. I think, Vice Chair Barron, our Vice Chair of Broadcasting, would like to jump in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome. So, what is your position in respect to the level of contribution that could be imposed on online undertakings. I know you've mentioned
We said
increasing
7%,
with the 7%.
yeah.
Okay. And is your position on the 7% consistent with regards to online video undertakings and online audio undertakings, or would you make a distinction between the two?
No distinction.
Thank you. Now, we've
But
had
sorry, just to add to that, as well, I think in the questions to this hearing, there was also the question of the audio, and there was also a question of unique transactions, and that was kind of surprising because when I watch or stream a show, or if I buy a show online, if I just rent it, it's the same. It's still streaming. It's still a way. What if I don't have a Netflix subscription and I just rent the 4 movies I watch every month and I still pay the exact same amount of money? There should be no distinction to how it comes in and what the price is, or how they decide how they're going to monetize the content. The cost of doing business in Canada should be to contribute to the Canadian system, and that includes local news.
Okay,
Thank you.
noted. We've had discussions with many interveners with regards to contribution to funds that aren't directly related to news or audio and support for audiovisual, but more specifically things like the Broadcasting Participation Fund to fund participation in CRTC proceedings, and other funds that could specifically target Indigenous programming and programming by equity-seeking groups. So how could the Commission, in your view, balance these other interests and priorities in an equitable way through funding?
Well, I think the funding that the 5% was divided, right? For a portion went to the CMF, a portion can go to the Broadcasting Participation Fund, which I think is important. Funding Indigenous programming is important, and so that's why we need more money into the pie, because that 5% was already allocated. We are suggesting an extra 2%, and I think a small portion of that 7% should absolutely flow to those areas.
Okay, so you've increased the pie and taken the allocations from that.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Let's go over to Commissioner Levy.
Good morning. Welcome. I'm interested in how you think extra money would change the system, not simply backfill the system. For instance, what would you see as innovation in a new system? Because if we can't turn the clock back to 2009, certainly news is being done in new and different ways. How do we make sure that there's incentive for innovation?
Right. And I think if you step back, we talk about new and innovative ways that we do news, and we look at the history. I've been in the broadcasting business a long time, over 30 years, and so I used to edit on 3/4 reel tapes, and I used to in school I used to actually physically cut the tape and tape it back together, and now it's much simpler. I mean, it's all on Avid computers, and you can just my 12-year-old kid can, edit a little thing on his phone, put it on TikTok. But, news has to be people on the streets talking to people about what's happening. And that's never changed. There's no innovation that's going to solve that problem. So you need a reporter to hold you to account, and no innovation is going to solve that. And all of the rest, the technology, that's already happening. We see lots of innovations. We're taking advantage of technology, and we'll always do that. But you just can't substitute a reporter on the street asking you a tough question to hold you to account.
question becomes whether that journalist needs to be centralized in one place or whether there's an opportunity to spread it out so that more local coverage is.
Right, and that's why we need the funding, because right now, these news outlets just can't afford to send somebody to, say, to Moncton or to Saskatoon. So instead, we'll just do it online, or innovation doesn't necessarily substitute for having somebody feet on the street in those locations. And that's where this money is gonna
And
help us.
who's also subject to a code of journalistic ethics.
Of course, yeah.
And all of the rest of it. One other question, we've had some interveners say that the problems in the news field are about to be solved by, you know, new agreements that are bringing new money into the system, and that this is less of an issue. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, no, if anyone here thinks that $100 million from Google is just going to solve all our problems, it's just not going to. This is a piece of a puzzle. And we have a big puzzle here, and C18 is a piece of the puzzle. C11 is a piece of the puzzle. The LJI, which is a piece of the puzzle. The labor tax credits are a piece of the puzzle. There is a patchwork of funding mechanisms and supports that are, I think, all going to come together to support local news. But as we've seen, $100 million from Google isn't going to solve it. And then what if Google's not around in 10 years? Then what? We need to find a robust way and many different avenues to continue to support local news.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go over to Commissioner Naidu.
Hi there. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
You had mentioned that that when it comes to ILNIF, there are ways that it can be fixed, either to fold it into another fund or to expand the funding that ILNIF gets. So I'm just wondering if you, with the current needs of news, what do you think a sufficient amount of funding would be for ILNIF or a fund like that, if 20 million isn't enough?
Right. I don't have that number handy, obviously, but as I pointed out, I think in 2014 the LPIF was 100 million, and without that, this is where we are. So I think that if I was to say off the top of my head, probably north of double that amount, but I'd have to get back to you on those specific numbers.
Sure, thanks. And of course, things are changing on a daily basis. You mentioned Chorus, you mentioned CBC, and the needs to draw on funds like that, may change as we move forward. I wanted to also talk a little bit about, we all know that news is the cornerstone to democracy. Is there something that you think that can be done to make news viable in the long term?
Yeah, like I said, it's the puzzle, the piece of the puzzle. So we have all those pieces that I mentioned, the LGI, the tax credits, we have C18 and C11. And I imagine a future where all of those, at least the C18 and the C11 puzzle pieces sort of come together. Because, I think, maybe 10, 15, 20 years from now, there'll almost be no distinction between a Toronto Star and a CTV, whereas right now we clearly think of a newspaper and a television station, and those are starting to merge together. So those two puzzle pieces might come together, but I think there'll always be a place for government support. We're hoping that maybe the government will open philanthropic avenues and different ownership structures we're looking into for news organizations. I think I saw the Czech folks in the room, and that was a long time ago where the employees bought the station, and I think that's just marvelous. So there's lots of opportunities, and there's lots of pieces of the puzzle and lots of moving pieces, but here today we got to talk about the broadcasting system and putting this piece of puzzle firmly in place and set a strong foundation.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about keeping news afloat is one thing. Quality of journalism is another thing. We're seeing much more today that journalists are being asked to provide content on a number of platforms, and to, especially when it comes to broadcast, to not just do the writing and the storytelling, but to do the shooting and to do the editing and all of that kind of stuff. And I wanted to ask if you felt that something needed to be done as far as funding goes in order to improve the quality of journalism and maybe take some of the load off of those journalists so they can focus more on the content.
Right. Well, and that's exactly right back to Commissioner Levy's point, right, is that there is no substitute for feet on the street. And those journalists are stretched thinner and thinner and thinner, asked to do more and more every day, and asked to post on social media. And then don't get me started on that, because the effects on their mental health and the harassment and the abuse that they face takes a whole nother toll. So all that put together, you're absolutely right. And when you ask journalists and when you ask media workers what is the most important thing when we go into bargaining with employers, and they talk about employment level, and they say there's not enough people in my department to do a good enough job, but they always do. And then we talk about the toll that it takes on them after the end of their shift, and so I think employment levels are a super important thing for you folks to look at when we decide make these decisions.
The whole business of news has changed a lot over the decades. And you mentioned a little bit about some of the strife that journalists walk into when they're doing simply just doing their jobs. And I'm just wondering about whether you think that there's a need to contribute towards literacy, news literacy, about the importance of news, educating people about why it's so important, and if you think a portion of funding needs to go towards that.
That sounds like a great idea. I'm always talking about that at work, like, I remember in grade 4, we had a media literacy component to our English classes, and it was super important. In grade 7 or 8, we had a whole television production and film production class. And the schools they just don't have the capacity for those types of programs anymore. I think it's a great idea.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Unifor has been very clear in terms of your focus, which is to ensure that we have sustainable and ongoing funding for local news in Canada as part of this new contributions framework. Is there anything else that perhaps we haven't covered this morning? And I will turn things back over to you for any concluding remarks. Is there anything else that we didn't have a chance to cover that you would like to share with us, and any other concluding thoughts?
Thank you. No, I'll just end by saying that, I just really hope. I've been doing this for a long time. I think when I started, I was secretary of my union in 2009, and somebody said, well, the CRTC is going to decide whether they're going to regulate online undertakings. And I just knew I had to do something. So we got together a submission to the CRTC, and it was my first one. So I feel like I've been asking for this for a long, long time. And so I just ask you to do something, please. And second, we need to protect the Canadian broadcast system, and especially local news. We need to ensure that the foreign streamers pay their fair share. And I ask you to stand firm in the face of adversity, because we know these big corporations and these big foreign streamers can act as bullies, and we've seen that with the Heritage Minister, and we really appreciate their efforts in standing firm with Google and Facebook and making sure that they pay their fair share, and I'd ask you to do the same. And to remember that news and Canadian news is part of the fabric of our democracy. And lastly, that any measures of success when we talk about local news has to be measured in employment. And I know with your questions, your very thoughtful questions, that you've taken all that into account, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Unifor for your participation and for being here this morning.
Thank you.